Hello everyone. Today is the last day of 2020 and so I was thinking, what should I make for today's video? Well, then it struck me. I could make a video on the best games that were played this year. And I've done that. Exactly. So basically today I'm going to show you two of the games that were played this year, which I like. They're the favorites. They're my favorite games this year. So the first game we're going to see is between Vidit Gujrathi and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and this was played in the Skilling Open, which is part of the Champions Chess Tour, which is right now going on. So Vidit is white and Vachier-Lagrave is black. Vidit opens with d4, nf6, c4, g6, knight c3 and d5. So we have the Grunfeld, which is one of my favorite openings. Then c takes, knight takes, e4, knight c3 and bc3. This is known as the exchange Grunfeld. So after that, bishop g7 and bishop e3. And now the main point of the Grunfeld is that white builds up a strong center and black attempts to break it with c5 and f6, e5 and sometimes even b6, bishop b7. So c5, then knight f3 and queen a5, queen d2, castling. Now rook c1, which is a good move. Now this defends the pawn and we're trying to go with d5. So then bishop g4, putting more pressure on this d4 pawn because now you're threatening to take and then takes and this pawn is lost. So d5 and now b5. So b5 is like this stops the bishop coming to b5, not right now but in the near future. By the way, over here the main move is knight d7 and then white can play c4. So like just a strong center, but all of black's pieces are perfectly developed and the rooks are also connected. So b5, then b takes c5. So b5 you also sort of give up this pawn, but you get like a good attacking position. So b cross c5, now rook c8. So this is like just putting pressure on the c3 pawn, and the only way to defend it is with bishop b4. Now you might think, what's the problem with bishop d4 over here? Well, after bishop to d4, then b cross f3, g cross f3, b cross d4 and queen cross d4. Of course, after bishop cross d4, you can't take with the pawn because then rook take c1 is just a free rook because the queen is also pinned. So queen cross d4, and now after queen cross a2, white has a bishop against a knight and black is doing okay over here. So then bishop b4, queen c7, just bearing down this file with the rook and the queen. So knight d4, just like blocking the bishop, and a5. So this must have been what Maxime prepared, just like push the bishop away, then b4 and bishop b2. You might be thinking over here you can just take, but then queen e5, and even if you take the rook on c8 over here, then after bishop takes, you see that you are losing this, and if this knight move, so what basically the bishop and the queen are bearing down this diagonal, and the queen is also attacking this pawn. So black is better over there. So bishop b2, queen b6, attacking the knight, and bishop b5, a good move. Now you must be thinking, why can't you just take the... Isn't this just a free bishop? Because now you've removed the defender. There was a knight here which was defending, but you just removed it. Well, then after queen takes d4, this bishop here isn't hanging, because if the queen takes, then white has this strong move c4, and this bishop is opened up, and these pieces are threatening a mate on g7 and also attacks the queen here. So that's why bishop cross d4 doesn't work. After bishop b5, even bishop cross b cross c3, sorry, you might be thinking that's good. And so you can't take with the bishop, right? Because when bishop takes, rook c1, queen c1, this is just a free bishop, right? Of course, not this bishop, because then the white is just attacking all the time. So bishop cross c3 is a bad move. But you don't take with the bishop, you take with the rook. Because then rook c3, bc3, vd4 and queen d4, and again you're threatening a mate over here. So this bishop is kind of protected. So that's why in this position, Maxime played e5. So in passing, d6, b6, knight e6, fe6. Now if queen cross e6, then just castling, and white is doing pretty okay. So f cross c6. Now over here, this position, Vidit has experience playing in this position because he played it against Leon Mendonca at the FIDE Online Olympiad finals. So like very high stakes there. So he has excellent preparation. Then c4, also an attack over here. Now after c4, what Mendonca had done in their game was b cross b2. After that, queen cross b2, knight c6, queen f6, threatening e6, knight d4, protecting, bishop d7, rook f8, then queen e5, and rook takes f2, because if the king takes, then there's like there are many nasty discovered checks. So, and it was a crazy game which ended in a draw. Now in this position, that was in the Mendonca game, Vidit had done his homework and found out that c5 is the best move. So like, you take my queen, I'll take your queen. So just take, and white is doing better than black. So over here, Maxime played rook d8, and he said that, see, if you play something like queen e2, then we will go into the same game that you had with Mendonca, only with one difference, that the rook is not on c8 in the starting position, it has moved to d8. So let's see, b cross b2, queen cross b2, knight c6, queen f6, knight d4, and now you remember that against Mendonca he had played bishop d7, but that's no longer possible because of rook d8. So after c4, rook d8, and Vidit played c5. So now it looks as if, of course, this bishop isn't hanging because then the rook is hanging as well. So And if something like queen c7, then queen e2, b cross b2 and queen cross b2, and you can see that this bishop is no longer hanging. We're just going to castle and bring our other rook into the game, and white is doing okay. So after c5, he took the queen, pawn takes, rook cross b2, and now it seems as if you can play b7, but then just rook a7, and even if rook c8 check, king f7, rook cross b8, black has the nice move bishop e5, which attacks the rook. After the rook moves to any square, we are going to pick up the pawn, and we don't even have to pick up that pawn. See, the bishop guards the b8 square. You can just play rook b1 check and win up this rook as well. So after r cross b2, Vidit played rook c8 check, king f7, rook c7 check, and now Maxime took his king to f8. Of course, king g8 was also possible, and that will come up at a later point in the game, so just stay tuned. Then he played king f8, and now Vidit played the cool move rook a7, which is just like you're putting this rook under house arrest, kind of, because it's trapped. If you take the rook, then pawn takes, and you can see that we're going to promote on this ace 8 square. So basically, then, and over here, rook c8 check, king e7, rook c7 check, king d6 already looks scary for white. So after rook a7, he went rook b1 check. He's like, okay, I'll just pick up your rook. So king e2, rook cross h1. And now Vidit played f4, which is a very nice move. Because see, over here if you took this rook, then just bishop e5 and this knight is protected. And let's see, white has a pawn for a knight. So basically, white will be thinking like, gah. So after r cross h1, he played f4, stopping bishop e5. Now he's threatening to take the rook. So rook c1, rook cross a8 and rook c8. Then e5. And what you see here is that even though white is down a pawn for a knight, he has the positional advantage, because kind of like this bishop can't go anywhere. This knight can't move because this rook would be hanging. So basically, white is playing kind of like a bishop up. So g5 and g3. We don't have to take. That will just ruin our structure. So g3 just keeps it going. Then g takes and bishop h6. And now Vidit found the move king f3, which is a very nice move. So king g7. Now over here is the moment where I told you before that what if the king would have been on g8? Well, over here it could have actually saved black a tempo, because if the king was on g8, then rook f8 and you're just attacking the f4 pawn, which can't really be protected. So, well, but of course king g8 would have its own pros and cons. Then king g7, rook a7 check. Now, if you go to g6, then just king g4 and h4, h5 is about to be a mate. The king has nowhere to go. So it's very scary for black. That's why after rook a7, he went down. Then rook c7, rook f8, and now Vidit found the move rook c4. Now rook f7 would have been the best move, because rook c8, rook f8 and b7. This looks a bit scary for black, but it's alright, because Well, it is alright. So, but rook f7 well could have been the best move. But he played bishop g5. Bad move. And Vidit played king g4. Then bishop d8, b7, bb6 and rook c8. Then king g7. And now Vidit, if he had found the move bishop c4, then he would have been in a completely winning position. But he played king f3. Let's just look at bishop c4. So after bishop c4, wait, okay, I'll just tell you what happens after king f3. After king f3, then bishop a7. This knight is protected. Then bishop e8, and they repeated moves, knight a6, b5, knight b8. And it was a draw by threefold repetition. But let's go back to bishop c4. Then, now if bishop a7, then just you take this pawn, and there's nothing to say here. And after bishop c4, if you play something like bishop e3, that must have been what Vidit was scared of. Then he had to find the move king f3. And now if you take, let's say, bishop cross f4, then rook takes f8, king takes f8 and king takes f4 is completely winning for white. And over here, if rook takes f4, then king takes e3, again completely winning. And over here, if you played something like, let's say, bishop d2, then you take this, rook f4 and king e2, and now you see that this bishop doesn't really have any good squares. So bishop c3, and now you can just pick up this, and while you're threatening to queen, you're going to play rook g8 and then queen. So that was the game between Vidit and Maxime. This was the first game. Now the second game I'm going to show you is between Daniil Dubov and Sergey Karjakin, and it's been named the game of the year. This year it's been named the game of the year. So just you have to remember that. Now, okay, so just wait, I'm just the pictures. Okay. Okay. And it's been named the game of the year. So Dubov is white and Sergey is black. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6 and bishop c4. So Italian game. Then bishop c5 and c3. So we have the Dvico piano. Then after knight f6, usually white plays d3, after which this pawn is protected. You bring your knight to d2, you castle, and you bring your queen to b3, and it's very good for white. But what Dubov played here was d4, which is something that usually beginners play, just like take full control of the center. So after d4, e cross d4, now usually you take back, after which bishop b4 check, and you kind of give up this central pawn, but you get really rapid development. So, but over here, Dubov played b4, just like attacking this, and bishop b6. Now, he didn't play b5, attacking the knight, and he didn't even take this pawn with either the pawn or the knight. What he played was e5. He's like, first I have to get this pawn out of the way. So e5. Then usually here you go d5 and takes, and this isn't very scary, this pawn, because then just rook g8, you're going to castle long. And if white desperately tries to hold this pawn, then just queen f6, and you can see that the pawn is gone. So knight e4. I don't know why Karjakin didn't play d5. Maybe there's something he didn't like. So knight e4, and now after bishop d5, knight takes c3, knight takes c3, d takes c3. You can see that white is 2 pawns down, but just look at his development. Then after that, bishop g5, and wait. So over here, usually it's castling, but bishop g5 is a novelty. It has never been played before. But actually, this whole thing is a novelty because it's never been played at the serious level. Now after bishop g5, only way to save the queen is knight e7, castling, h6, then bishop h4, and castling. Okay. Now over here, if he plays g5, then actually Dubov could have just taken, because if h cross g5, then b takes g5, and basically just look at these two bishops, they're monstrous. But of course, after knight takes g5, you've sort of given up the pin, but then knight takes d5, then knight f3, knight e7, and bishop f6, and your king is feeling very uncomfortable here. So he played castling. Now rook e1, a good move, which you'll see why it's a good move. And he played queen e8. Now, if somehow he wants to get away this e5 pawn, then he could have played d6, but then just e cross d6, and you can see that Dubov's last move, rook e1, wins this. So just after c cross d6, b cross c7, queen e8, and you take. And now you see that those two pawns were actually one. Now, actually, white has a rook and a knight for a bishop and 2 pawns. And after rook e1, if he tries to shoo away the bishop, then just bishop b3, and really black hasn't done anything for himself. He's improved white's position, because now just queen d3 and bishop c2, and your gateway is open here. So after rook e1, he played queen e8, but then he still went bishop b3, a5, just to try and play on the queen side. And now Dubov played the deadly move, bishop f6. Just like now, if you take, then I'm going to take, and this I'm going to take, after which that rook will be also hanging. And if he tries to free up this space for his rook, then rook cross f7, and if the queen moves to e8, then after bishop c2 and queen d3, there's really no way to stop a mate incoming. So after bishop f6, he played a4, bishop c4, knight g6, queen d3, and now d5. Now after d5, again, you don't have to take with either this or this. You can take it and pass it, which unleashes an attack on the queen. So then bishop e6, and now this is this move that Dubov played here is why this game is named Game of the Year. Queen takes g6. Now if f takes g6, then actually this was only played, then rook e6. Now we're threatening a discovered attack on the queen, and if he tries to hold on to it, then just rook e7, queen c4, rook g7, king h8, rook c7, rook f6, rook c4, and now white has a pawn and a knight for a bishop. So after r to c6, he went queen f7, then b takes c3, king h8. Now there's no discovered check. So rook e4, queen f5, rook e7, and in this position, even if you put on an engine, it really can't tell you who's better. And let's look at the material. White has a bishop and a knight for a queen. It's 2 pieces for a queen. He hasn't even won a rook. So if it were a rook, then black would have been just 1 point up. But okay, anyway, rook g8, because after rook e7 we're threatening the g7 pawn. Now he has to sacrifice the rook, and d takes e7, queen c2, bishop e5. Now over here the material is even, because rook, knight and pawn for queen. Just see, equal 9 versus 9. So bishop cross f2. Now black has a pawn, and this bishop f2 move looks a bit scary because it's a pawn, it's check, so it's scary. But it's not, because just king h1, you have to retreat the bishop. h3, just like opening up some space for the king. After that, king h7, rook e1, a3. He's like, I have to get this rook into the game. He hasn't moved for 29 moves. So a3, king h2, then g5, knight d4, and now if you take, then b takes d4, and over here the key is either it's to win the a3 pawn or not to lose a2 pawn. So anyway, after knight d4, he played queen c4, knight f5, queen takes b4, rook c1. Like, there's no hurry to move this ahead. This pawn is getting like a red carpet to go on. So king g6, then rook g7, king cross f5 and rook g8, then b cross c7, b cross c7, and now over here white has 2 rooks and a bishop for a queen, and over here it's all about the coordination of the pieces, and the pieces are coordinating beautifully. And also the key is either here also, it's either win this pawn or not lose this pawn. So queen b2, then rook c5 check, king e4, and now Dubov played rook d8. And on this mysterious move, Sergey Karjakin resigned. Now after rook d8, you must be thinking this is a free pawn, but well, you're getting checkmated, because rook e5, king f4, and rook d4 mate. And well, so those were the 2 games I wanted to show you, but that's not all, because I also have some exciting news. This year 2020 is ending on a high note for Indian chess, because India just got its 67th Grandmaster yesterday night. And his name is Leon Mendonca. Just let me show you the picture. So this is Leon, and he has become the 67th GM of India yesterday night at the age of 14 years, 9 months and 17 days. There's an article on the ChessBase India website, I guess. I'll put the link in the description. So basically this year is ending on a high note for Indian chess, and well, I think that's it for today and this year as well. So well, bye, and I'll see you next year.